I'm going to just start. So I am here, for anyone who doesn't know, with Skutchdraws. And maybe you could introduce yourself and just tell us a little about yourself.
All right. Well, my name's Ben. I've spent the last 6 months kind of doing people on YouTube and Twitter, kind of the left-wing political sphere of these groups mostly. I'm kind of in the process of self-teaching like digital painting, and I've spent most of this month relearning how to do pen and ink drawings because of Inktober. And yeah, like we just, this is like, what, 2-3 days since Contrapoints just launched her merchandise, which I did the art for, which was a bit of an interesting launch. We had one small mistake, one small cataclysm.
Did you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, it's what's on my mind. I misspelled something on one of the shirts. Well, I don't know if it's technically a misspelling. I used a weird or known spelling for the word DOST, which Contra had actually corrected me on, but I decided to tweak the colors on the image at the last minute, and I accidentally used the wrong version of the picture. So she had to swap that. And the larger issue was we did a shirt that had the phrase, "I am not in a cult led by Contrapoints" on it. And it turns out that Titanic Sinclair, the guy who created Poppy, has used that phrase in his merchandise. And we were rather brusquely corrected on that. And Contra immediately took the shirt down, and, we're changing the phrase on it. But I got to spend like 8 hours arguing with a bunch of teenagers, calling me a thief and encouraging like Titanic Sinclair to try and sue me over this, which, I had no idea that the phrase had been used by that before. I watched one episode of Poppy when it like first came out, and kind of didn't pursue it further because it didn't really seem too much like my thing. And I don't know, like that was it's kind of interesting getting dogpiled on what you thought would be a really good day.
Oh, because that was, if I remember right. Now, some people, and I don't know Poppy from anything, but some people have associated Contrapoints, either saying she looks like Poppy or something like that. I've heard it come up before.
Well, it's like a parody of like pop icon, like commercial music and movies and stuff, and it's mostly meant to be kind of a parody of how kind of fake and vapid like the entertainment industry is. I mean, honestly, I thought it's kind of shallow. It seems like it's aimed at like, teenagers who look at like pop music and are just kind of like, oh, geez, kids who think that like, oh, I listen to Led Zeppelin, which makes me really deep and I'm really smart for my age. I don't know, like there's some aesthetic similarities to what Contra does, but Contra actually, has points about the things that she makes videos about and, has like real depth to her material. Whereas I think Poppy's kind of surface level, which I think is kind of by design. It's also kind of, how many ways are there to say that pop culture is vapid? There's just, there's not too much there to it. So I never was a big fan of it. The phrase got thrown out during a game of TKO during one of Contra's streams. And I thought it was funny because, the left wing gets called cults all the time. Like during the whole election was called a member of a cult because I didn't like Donald Trump by everyone who I know who's like a conservative. So I thought it was in reference to that. So, we put it on a shirt. I don't know. I heard the phrase before, judging by her response. I don't think she knew either. And, we took it down immediately, but I still had like 8 hours of people pestering me on Twitter saying I deserve to be like ruined in court and like driven out into the street because of this. And, you try and ignore it, but then you're at a certain point kind of like, look, this has already been fixed. We did what we were asked. The guy actually doesn't even have a copyright on it. A nearly identical joke got used both in The Simpsons and King of the Hill years before. So I don't know. It's just
Yeah, I can't imagine that. Like, if you said I'm not in a cult run by Poppy, that would be one thing, but you can't just...
Yeah, well, like, I don't know, people were associating, like, at one point during her transition, Contra had tweeted, "I am Poppy," like, as a joke in response to something someone said. And, you know, I was really the one who pitched that idea to Contra. So, I mean, if it was anyone's fault, it was mine. I should have Googled the phrase. Like, I'll take 100% responsibility for failing to do that because, you know, I did, and Poppy is, like, the first thing that comes up. But, you know, like, I don't know, people were really kind of conflating things that Contra had said with things that I said and acting like we were the same person when two different halves to this. And I'm, you know, honestly, it's my fault. Like, I'm the one who pitched it as an idea. I'm the one who didn't Google it. But, you know, it's one of these things where, you know, after a certain point, you're just kind of posting, like, this has been resolved. Stop, like, encouraging this person to sue us. You know, like, we've done everything that we were supposed to have done. But, you know, other than that, you know, the response was great. Like, you know, we had a lot of people, like, compliment the designs and stuff. And, you know, I'm looking forward to doing more future. Hopefully it wasn't so much of a pain in the ass for Contra that she doesn't want to work with me anymore, although I think it's fine.
Yeah, I'm sure she's pretty mellow. No, I love the shirts. I wanted to get the oh, what is the name? Tabby. I wanted to.
Everyone liked that one. Like that one best. I got more that are like simple graphic designs. Like, it really jumps out at you.
Yeah, that was awesome. All right. First time is always going to have a hiccup or two. That's how we learn.
Yeah, sometimes you get told "fuck you" by someone with like 45,000 Twitter followers, and a bunch of teenagers dogpile you.
Yeah, whatever. And all of these teenagers, I'm sure, think that they are experts in copyright law. So.
Oh, they all. What's funny is someone actually did come to our defense and was like posting something from, I think it was like Stanford Law Review, about like what is and isn't copyrightable, and it's like, you know, we could have kept the shirt up. There's no way, you know, it ever would have gone to court, but it was just like, you know, we took it down because they asked. You know, like, it seemed like the right thing to do. But, you know, you get like these 13-year-olds that think they know everything.
I had a similar thing with my original avatar, so I understand, because I'm still getting flack from that. And
yeah, I'll never forget. And it's it's always over things where it's like, you know, okay, you were told it, you immediately fixed it, you apologize, and you know, still try and hold it against you. You know, it's like people just don't give you like room to grow or learn anything.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of, I think, the tribalism, or the, you know, us versus them mentality.
Oh, yeah,
that I should point out, we did this before, and I'm really bad with with anything. As a YouTuber, I should be less shit at doing these kinds of things, but I'm not. I'm terrible. So the first one, the audio is completely unusable. And this feels a little weird because it's like, let's have the exact same conversation we did before again.
Well, that's why I decided you should start on something a little new, you know, so that it's like, you know, at least covering some ground that we didn't cover the first time.
But, so we should start at the beginning. Now, when did you sort of get into art, and can you tell us a little about your background?
Yeah, you know, I always kind of like drew as a kid and all, and after like my senior year of high school, like I switched schools my junior year, and I had the option to essentially test out of classes. So I kind of was like, well, how many classes will you let me, you know, take tests for? And it was quite a long list. So I quickly ended up, you know, I'm good at taking tests, so I quickly ended up with like only a half day's worth of courses I could take at a time. So my high school had an affiliation with the Atlanta College of Art. So they were like, how would you like to go to the college and take courses 2 days a week. So, I jumped on that opportunity and started taking drawing courses there. And, as a result, I didn't have to apply, once I was done with high school, they just let me in and did my first year there and started my second year. We were all told to check the school email on a certain day at a certain time. And we opened it up and discovered, oh, yeah, the school's been sold to SCAD, which is kind of like this, that's like how the staff found out and everything. It's just sprung on us. Essentially what happened was the Woodruff Art Center, which owned the Atlanta College of Art, had decided they wanted to build an opera hall in Atlanta. And this essentially, as a result, they were trying to kind of get their financial affairs in order and to try and sell some assets to get some money on hand. So they sold us to SCAD, and the opera hall never got built because they had this idea that, the city of Atlanta would pay for half of it. And this was right when we had a major sewer collapse, and we realized there was going to be this multi-billion-dollar fix required on the city sewers. So we, kind of the fallout of that was, no opera hall, but we ended up being part of SCAD. And since I'd already declared a major, which was in drawing, there had been a lawsuit between some students of the Atlanta College of Art and SCAD where the result essentially, I think they settled out of court, I don't remember, but the result was they couldn't force anyone to change their major if that major didn't exist at SCAD. So I am one of 2 people to ever graduate from SCAD with a fine arts with concentration in drawing, which I probably shouldn't have done. It essentially meant I never, until my junior year, I didn't have an academic advisor, until my late junior year, and that professor left after 2 quarters. So for most of my education, I had no academic advisor. I'd taken some classes in the sequential art department, which is common. And I decided okay, yeah, I liked that. I like comic books. So, I did 6 months of grad school there. And after that, I kind of left because it was just it was really intense. There were a lot of politics, which, I had not expected to have to deal with as a student, with everything going on in the department. And I kind of just, decided yeah, this really isn't for me. At that point in time, I had started painting Warhammer models for a living. And, it was kind of dealing with everything in school and doing this really labor intensive side job, which I kind of realized, I had the opportunity to just do it full time and make a living. And it was all right, that's kind of art, and I can make enough money to get by on it. So I did that for about 5 years until, who I'd met in college who basically kind of slowly turned into an Alex Jones conspiracy person, and then started getting really fashy, and that situation got kind of scary. And a friend of mine who lived in Macon, Georgia, was moving to Charleston, which is where my roommate lived from college. And I kind of decided, things are getting a little intense here in Atlanta. I don't have that much tying me down, so I moved here to Charleston and worked a bunch of different odd jobs over the years. And, after a while kind of decided, I need to get back into doing art. So, I 2 years ago took up digital painting, and about 6 months ago started a Twitter account and decided to start sending out fan art, see what the response would be. And, it's been pretty amazing, I've made some friends. I've gotten to do the merchandise for Contra, which is really exciting. It was a lot of fun. And, I'm going to be continuing to add some new designs. And, right now I'm also helping Ranting Feminist redesign her channel. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, because she has sort of an anime style. Are you working with that, or?
Oh, yeah. She's already changed her avatar to the image that I drew for her, and she has it up on her Patreon. I actually just the other day sent her a bunch of facial expressions and a landscape background. I'm going to do my next few, because on Sundays I do landscapes. My next few are going to be done in the same format, so she'll be able to use those as well. And yeah, Probably do a few other things for her channel, try and, gussy it up. I mean, she already makes really good videos. She can just get the aesthetics to match, Ought to work out pretty well for her.
Oh yeah, that'll be awesome. Now, so what made you decide to sort of focus on this little corner of lefty YouTube or progressive YouTube?
It was what I was watching while I was painting, and as a result, I probably have watched like every Hbomberguy, Sean and Jen, and Contra Points video at least 3 times. I kind of realized, like, yeah, why am I watching these things over and over again? I really do enjoy them, and like, I don't know, I think like it was, I just randomly, this is before I had a Twitter account, had clicked on Contra's Twitter one day, and Alan Blazkovic, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his name, had done some fan art for Contra, and I saw that and was like, oh, this is really cool. This is a really good idea. I should like this. So, I kind of decided to sit down and do some fan art for, let me think, the first batch I did was Dan Olson, Contrapoints, Hbomberguy, and Dick Coughlin. And I did Dan first because I discovered everyone through his channel, and I absolutely love his videos. I sent that off. I essentially had started all 4 images at the same time, with the idea of I'd post one a day. And I posted the one for Dan, and that turned out to be the day that Contra Points did the video where she was debating Blair White. So I looked at Contra's Twitter, and it was just full of trolls, like, just people attacking her. And I was kind of like, oh man, this is pretty ugly. They're saying like some really mean, uncalled for things. So I kind of decided to quickly finish of Contrapoints to post. And, I tweeted that out the same day, and then kind of immediately realized, oh crap, I have nothing for tomorrow. So I just stayed up all night finishing my drawing of Hbomberguy, and I forgot about the time difference. I didn't realize I like tweeted it out at like 8 p.m. or something. So it, like would have been like 3 a.m. in England. So literally no one saw that. But yeah, I finished up like Dick Coughlin one the next day, and then I didn't realize it for like a day or two, but I literally slept for over 24 hours. I just completely crashed. I just like woke up on Tuesday and was just like, why am I so thirsty? And just went to work. Which funny because my boss had actually told me the wrong days I was supposed to work that week. So it ended up kind of working out perfectly. So I didn't realize till like Friday that it had happened. Yeah, I've worked out like a better work schedule, so that has not happened again.
Well, you are very prolific. I mean, you really keep to your schedule. I mean, I make schedules. A lot of people make schedules, but to see actually your output being so consistent for so long is just amazing.
Yeah, I try and post something every day. My goal is to do that for a year. Today marks 6 months, so I'm halfway there. And, but I'm also like doing things on the side. So like the last few weeks were pretty hard, like, making that deadline while at the same time doing 5 designs for Contrapoints and stuff for, Ranting Feminist. And I have another project I'm working on the side. So, I mean, that's really the reason I started posting my Lego robots. It's just so I can do is photograph some stuff, do a little bit of editing, and then I can, work on other stuff.
Well, those are cool too, and those are my little one's favorites. So there you go. Interesting because there are, I think, quite a few little artists in this sort of sphere, and I don't think they get enough attention. So I thought maybe, I know we talked about them last time, so I thought maybe you could sort of cover some of the people that are sort of in this art scene as well that you interact with.
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, there's Jen from Sean and Jen. Does like a lot of the images for Sean's videos. She's also done some stuff for Bad Mouse, although I think he's on hiatus at the moment. It's Pete Carrington, who streams with Sean and Jen a lot. He does just gorgeous, like, pen and ink drawings. Like, I've been trying really hard to try and level all this month. This stuff is just beautiful. Of course, there's Alan, who does like really awesome like cartoons. He's usually in Sean and Jen's video streams when they're playing video games. It's amazing how fast he is. Like, they'll say a joke, and within like 5 minutes, he'll have a cartoon of it like done in the comments. Let me think. There's Coliafi, who is like, oh my god, she's so freaking talented. Her paintings are just amazing. Like, I was actually lucky. She and I actually talked on Google Hangouts a couple nights ago, where she fixed some stuff on one of my paintings, showed me some things I was doing wrong, which was really, really helpful and really, really nice of her. Let me think, who else? Of course, there's Ina, Nice Mangoes, who does like really awesome like graphic design stuff. She also has like a really good podcast, Polite Conversations. Who else? I know there's more. Actually, has been doing art lately, and he's getting pretty good. Like, he's done a lot of like kind of digital photo collage stuff, but he's also been doing drawing, and he's getting better at a good rate.
Can you repeat the name, because there was a little bit of feedback right there?
Oh yeah, Bad Mouse has been. He's taken up art, and he's posted some things I thought were pretty cool. Trying to think. I know there are other people. It's just there's a lot now. It's like it's kind of hard to keep up with everyone. So I guess I apologize if I have forgotten anyone.
I'll let everyone know that I put you on the spot. You didn't know I was going to ask that. So
I should have known. I should have had a list ready.
But yeah, I would like to do more of these videos where I sort of highlight, because I think a lot of times we are so focused on things that are going badly, and we're not really sort of appreciating how rich and how diverse and how really strong our little tiny community is. So I'd like to see more of the sort of positive things put out there, and people being appreciated for what they do.
Well, I know that these are like a bit persona non grata amongst some people, but the guys from Chapo Trap House had an interesting observation where they were talking about how kind of I think the reason the left-wing sphere is so much more talented than the right-wing sphere is, a lot of these people on the right can get outside funding from people like the Mercers or the Kochs, and as a result, they'll let anyone in. Like, if you're willing to be like the Nazi streamer or whatever, it's such a small talent pool that you can be completely inept and still make a living. Whereas on the left, writers, filmmakers, poets, whatever, what have you, are left-leaning. So as a result, it's a lot more competitive. You have to be a lot better at what you're doing, and you have to consistently improve because the talent pool is constantly improving. So as a result, we have a little bit more of like a market force going on our side, ironically, where, we have to kind of be pretty good to get noticed. But at the same point also, like, we're more open and inclusive, and as a result, we collaborate more, we teach each other stuff, we share resources. So as a result, if you're putting in the effort and being a nice person, people will help you, and as a result, everyone improves, because as a result, you get exposed to other points of view, other methods of doing things, and, it'll make you better at what you're doing.
Well, and fascism specifically has, as part of its sort of makeup, is that they do not have an appreciation for the arts. They think that,
a very narrow version of like what is good.
Yeah.
Like, it's usually like hyper realism, but nowadays it's also tinged with like anime stuff, because they have this, they're total weebs. They have like this obsession with Japan, or at least the version of Japan that is depicted in anime. So yeah, it's just, you need to either be like hyper realistic or doing anime art. It's actually part of the reason I chose to do like, to work at photo it actually makes me a bit immune to a lot of their criticisms. I've done stuff for people and then, you know, had like people tweet at me like, you know, oh, screw you, you know, you dumb lib. Good art though. You know, like it makes it much harder for people to critique me than if I were doing like the more kind of abstract-y stuff that, you know, I did in college. Although, you know, I still like post the psychedelic stuff, like usually every Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays if, you know, I have to get something done or just, but, you know, like you kind of have to, I don't know, a little bit I'm playing their game just because it makes it, you know, these are not smart people. They're not good at like coming up with ways to argue you. So if you can cut off a major avenue of their arguments, then they don't really have much to say. You know, it's I don't know. It's one of those things where like I think part of the like one of the major benefits of like the left YouTube scene now is because of like Sean and Jen, Hbomberguy, and Contrapoints. When certain arguments get trotted out, you can just link a video, and it's like, well, here's something someone made that really thoroughly debunks that point that you're making, and they don't have an answer for it. You know, it just completely shuts them off from that. You know, because it's like they're not really clever enough to come up with a new argument to replace that.
I find that they just keep doubling down myself, but that might just be me.
they try, but like, you know, there are ways to, I don't think necessarily, you know, like change their minds, but there's certainly ways to kind of quiet them down. You know, like there's definitely some things you can kind of throw out there which they're not really prepared to deal with. You know, like I saw Kyle Colgren actually on Twitter a few days ago arguing war should be fought. And, you know, I chimed in because, you know, my grandmother was like an amateur, like Civil War historian, that, you know, the war would have been fought no matter what, because there was this whole thing where, you know, both sides wanted the Western territories and the South was continuously importing slaves illegally from Africa in order to kind of, you know, keep the price down. However, as a result, you know, they were one major recession away from having just, you know, complete collapse. So the only thing they could kind of do is expand into new territories to dilute the ratio of slaves to freed people. So, you know, like the war needed to be fought when it was fought because, you know, they were going to come and try and take those territories. And do you want to fight them now, or do you want to fight them when they're a legitimate state with a bunch of European allies? And, you know, you can make like, you know, of course, like the obvious argument everyone always makes is, you know, of course, slavery is immoral, which is, of course, correct and completely, as far as I'm concerned, wins the argument on its own. But when you start kind of talking the strategy of it, you know, that's more how fascists think. And you throw something like that out there, they're not going to be able to think their way around it because they don't know enough, or, you know, like they can't out-strategize that kind of stuff. You know, like they have this real, like, you know, emotional deadness. So you kind of can, you know, push them down with facts. And if you get them to the point where they're just trying to argue semantics with you, you know, you just stick to your guns and be assertive and, you know, they'll go away. You know, like, you know, I don't know if it changes minds, but it certainly looks to outsiders like you won.
Yeah, and I think that that is important, and that's kind of why we go through a lot of the motions that we go through, because we know, you know, at the end of the day, to some of the people we're arguing with, it doesn't really matter, and it isn't going to really matter.
Yeah, but their audience, there's always a ton of lurkers, and, you know, if they see, you know, what looks like someone who they agree with lose an argument, you know, it affects people. Like, you know, like when Christy Winters debated Sargon, you know, even Sargon admitted he lost that. So, you know, it has a real effect, you know, like, you know, Contrapoints has talked about this quite a bit, like how she's, you know, gone and debated all these people. And, you know, it also has the effect that she's pointed out, which is, you know, it makes them have to look at you as though you're a human being. You know, they can't just argue against a straw man because you're sitting right there representing yourself and speaking for yourself. And if they try and say that you believe something that you don't actually believe, you can call them out on it. And, you know, even if you don't perform well in the debate, you know, it forces them to acknowledge, like, you know, that there is another person on the other end. makes you less of this kind of, I don't know, this like fetishized like hate icon that they have. You know, like, I don't know, like it literally is like, you know, the traditional definition of like a fetish, you know, like a religious item or something is how they kind of view us. You know, they view us as this weird monolith of everything they dislike.
So speaking of fetishized hate objects, you want to talk about your Anita Sarkeesian. You set that up. I had to go in.
All right.
The Anita Sarkeesian thing.
All right. Well, I've done 3 paintings of Anita. I did one normal portrait, but the first one I did was a painting of Anita Sarkeesian dressed as the Virgin Mary holding a Pikachu. And that came about during one of Contra's live streams back when she was streaming Pokemon. I sent her like, I think it was 20 super chat and just said, "This comes with a drawing. Tell me what you want." And she just asked for Anita Sarkeesian with a Pikachu, which absolutely thrilled me because I'd actually really kind of hoped I'd be asked to draw Anita because Contra had been talking about Anita a bit like that night, and she was kind of drunk. So I did that image and tweeted it at her, and yeah, like it was kind of the first thing I did that kind of blew up. I actually tweeted at her, I think it was like a day or 2 before I went to my sister's wedding. And during the reception dinner, like my phone just started going completely crazy in my pocket, just like vibrating like every 2 seconds. And, you know, I get up, excuse myself, go to the bathroom and see that Ian Miles Chong had retweeted it. So it was just like I was just getting like a ton of death threats. And, you know, that was a weird experience, you know, like having to get up and speak in front of like, you know, my family and my sister's fiance's family, like knowing that there's like a bunch of people tweeting that I should be dragged behind a truck or have my hands broken. So it was kind of
oh, that's so awful. And it's such a cool image, really it is.
Oh, it was really funny too, was like, I basically had to wait to see what was happening, and Contra had started a live stream during that, so I wanted to see like, okay, what do I need to do? Do I acknowledge this or whatever? So I wait till the reception ends, I run back to my hotel room, boot up my laptop, and like my laptop will not it just wouldn't stream. Like I can see the chat, but it won't stream. So I pulled up on my phone and I can't use the chat. So I was literally watching the stream on my phone and like typing into the chat. Explained to me what was going on because I still did not fully understand everything that was happening. It was a weird night. Oh yeah, and I should mention this was during like the final stream where Contra was in full Lord Foppington garb for that. So just a whole like other layer of weirdness.
And well, it's cool because there's a sense of humor, and there's a sense of humor to a lot of your art that I think is really cool. But I know that I was talking to Memory Holiday, who's Jeff's Holiday's wife, and she's kind of friends, a friend of mine. She's actually a pretty nice person, and somebody is another like sort of more centristy, right-wingy kind of person, and me and Bronx Blogger are like showing this back and forth to each other, and they're going, "Oh my God, is that what I think it is? Is that Anita as the Virgin Mary with Pikachu?" And we're like, "Yes. The Dark Mother blesses us all." Yeah. They're just like blowing up, going, "Oh my God, we didn't know you guys could be funny."
Well, what I love about that is, yeah, like people just didn't really know what to make of it, which I think was the best part. Of course, then I ended up having to explain myself to Anita. I went to VidCon this year. And I guess I should tell my VidCon story. Genius that I was, I decided since my flight was first thing in the morning, I'll just stay up all night, get a little drawing done so that, I have something waiting when I get back to tweet out. And, I showed up to VidCon after traveling like 6 or 8 hours or something like that. And, I tweeted at Hbomberguy and Contra, who I'd agreed to meet with, and I got a response back. I think it was from Contra saying that, like, yeah, we're going to do a meetup, like, later on tonight, we'll tweet it out. So I was kind of just wandering around outside the convention hall because, like, the kind of expo hall wasn't open yet. So it was just kind of, the outdoor and foyer area. I was just, like, dead on my feet, like, about to pass out. They were having, like, a concert. So I decided, like, oh, this will be loud. This will keep me awake. So, I decided to go to the concert. And, it was all right. No one I'd ever heard of before. I felt like I was the oldest person there who didn't have a kid. But I get out and see that, like, oh, they tweeted out like an hour ago that, they were meeting, where they were meeting. So I ran over there and, basically pulled out my phone and was like sticking in the waiters' faces, being like, are these people still here? And, so I sat down at the bar, had a drink, decided to go home, and back to my hotel. And I tweeted to Contra when I was in the car, sorry I missed you, hopefully we can meet up at some point. And she tweeted me back going, oh, we're meeting up at this hotel. You should, come by. So, I swung by the hotel. Actually, I got taken to the wrong hotel. And then my next Lyft driver got on the highway going the wrong way. But I eventually got there. And I walk in and I see Dan Olson talking to Hbomberguy. I walk over and, like, introduce myself. And I immediately get this, like, who are you? Do we need security look? But once I, like, told them, like, who I was, they both, like, knew me because I'd, like, done art for them. Like, that was the point when Hbomberguy was using the painting I did of him standing over the golden one with Thor's hammer as his avatar. They kind of told me, like, oh yeah, Contra's in the other room talking with Lindsay Ellis and some people. So I went over there, got the exact same reception, and yeah, like, was kind of sitting down talking with them, and Anita Sarkeesian shows up. So Contra and I got to try and explain what we'd done to her because she had no idea what that image meant or, like, who we were. But I think she got it. Like, she didn't seem to think it was, like, that big a deal. Yeah, no, that was a weird night. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, like, then I forget if it was the next day or the day after. I think it was just the next day. I was attending panels and I saw Sargon and let me think who was it. It was like Joey Salads. I think Bunty was there. Basically all of them, like, wandering around. Like, they went to one of Cat Black's panels and they were all sitting there filming her. And when I saw them sit down at the panel that Anita was supposed to be at, and this is when they took up, like, the first 2.5 rows, I took out my phone and was just like, okay, I'm going to have to document this because, shit is going to go down. This is not going to be, like, unacknowledged. So I ended up being one of the first people to tweet out everything kind of as it was happening. Which...
Well, and I think that people have... a misunderstanding of, like, what that was like. So these are all these people just sitting there in 3 rows, like, with their cameras just pointed directly at Anita's little icon.
They weren't interested in listening to anything. It's like during the Cat Black panel, they just saw the whole thing. They were obviously just filming it to chop it up for bits to try and make people look bad with later. Like, they were just constantly, you saw people just turning their heads and talking with each other. So, they, were there, just to quote mine people. And, when I showed up, like, they already had the placards out with people's names on them. So it was obvious where Anita was going to sit, and they had sat themselves as close to where she was going to be as they could possibly get. And it's like, yeah, of course Anita's going to react to the fact that she sits down and the closest seat to her is someone who has been harassing her for, like, over 3 years and making these videos that, he knows what his fans are going to do. He just points in a direction and they attack. And, they act like, oh, I can't control it, but they know what they're doing. They're not dumb. They're not that dumb. Like, and there are, wanted to have like any real debate with her, you know, they hardly ever bring up her points, or they just bring up like 2 or 3 things that she ever said, you know, often out of context, and don't make any real effort, you know, to try and engage with the things that she's said or done, or the larger kind of volume of like her work. You know, like she's put out hours and hours of stuff, and they always just talk about that same stupid Hitman bit, which isn't even really the gotcha they think it is. You know, like they act like, oh, well, you know, the game penalizes you for that, so you're not supposed to do it. But it's like, you can still do it, and you know, the game designers enable you to, you know, like within games, you know, they enable you to do things or not, and they, you know, as a game designer, you know that people are going to do something that you didn't anticipate or that you don't want them to do. You know, like I remember when I was a kid, like I would play GoldenEye, and I think it was like the 3rd level of that. You're driving around on an airship, destroyed like 2 or 3 guns. No one can hurt you if you're in the tank. So yeah, you know, like being an idiot teenager, I spent plenty of time just driving around, running people over in a tank, and that's not the way you're supposed to play the game, but you can. And the creators know that you can. So, you know, they just kind of are going after like just these few little things they can kind of nitpick, and ignoring, you know, like just all the context of it. And they know that, like, you know, it's just like what happened with me. You know, their fans are shitty teenagers. Yeah. You know, they're at that age where they think they know everything, where they're angry because they've discovered that the world doesn't work quite the way they were told when they were younger kids. And as a result, you know, they're kind of looking for something to lash out at. And, you know, all these people have to do is point.
Yeah. I just recently got into an argument, and I just left the argument because it was stupid. You know, it was the same argument I've had before, but if you remember, Carl Sargon, whatever you want to call him,
yeah,
he had put out a woman, you know, he took her picture without her.
Oh, yeah. He had the, like, this is what a feminist looks like shirt or something like that.
She had like a shirt that just said feminist because she was working at Lush. And so he puts out where she worked, you know, the name of the store, the town, everything. So, you know, all of a sudden this person who has no idea has just been working for the day, you know, and she's all of a sudden getting harassed, and their store is getting harassed, and she has to call the police and all this. And, you know, I sort of said that. And then I have people coming to me and saying, well, after this all happened, he told them afterwards that they should stop, and he didn't mean it. You know, and the thing is, it's like, do you think Carl is the biggest moron on the fucking planet? Really?
Oh, yeah, he's dumb.
I mean, I would have told him what would have happened. Anybody who has followed him at all could have told him what would happen. So he didn't know.
Yeah, well, yesterday there was something just like that happened, where there was someone at that Richard Spencer event who, you know, was a counter-protester, and like the local news affiliate, I think it was Fox, used a freeze frame where it had his arm where he'd written his emergency contact number on, which is something you're supposed to do if you're going to a protest that could potentially turn violent. And they held on that image, you know, for like 20 seconds. And of course, his emergency contact is getting calls from Nazis. Saying, like, oh, your friend is really hurt, you need to come to this address, or just like spewing hate and stuff at them. You know, it's like, it's why like television, or on like television, you know, phone numbers start with 555. You know, like this is not a new phenomenon. You know, like people have known since the 60s. If you give someone a phone number, idiots will dial it. If you like point to like a real location, people will go there. They just had to put a fence around the house they used in Breaking Bad because people kept throwing pizzas on the roof. You know, this is just, unfortunately, this is just what idiots do. I mean, it's like, yeah, like the thing with like McDonald's and the Szechuan sauce. You point at something and you have like a platform, people will fixate on it. You know, it's just, this isn't a new phenomenon. This isn't something that, you know, is just happening in the last few years. Like, hell, I remember talking with someone once who was like in his 60s, and he talked about how called a phone number that had shown up in an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. when he was a kid. And I think he'd like lived in California or something at the time. So as a result, like his parents got this massive long distance phone call because it was like a Washington, D.C. number. So, you know, it's this is something that people should know. Yeah. You know, like hell, in Breaking Bad, like there's a part where they read out some coordinates where like Walter White's money's buried. You know, I guess spoilers, but the coordinates they used were the coordinates for their studio location, just to make sure that people weren't going to, you know, like type them in and then just wander out in the desert or show up at some random person's house or business. Mm. You know, it's like you have to plan for stuff like that. And yeah, it's like, this is just, it's what they expect. I mean, hell, like with Bering, I know Tim Blake made a video where it showed him, you know, ragging on some teenager who made a video that Bering didn't like. And then, you know, immediately afterwards, that person put up a video apologizing. And Bering, like in his video in response to the apology, was like, oh, well, that's good. Well, we got this person to get so many thousand downvotes. Let's see if we can get their next video so many thousand upvotes. So it's like, yeah, they know. They're just being purposely obtuse.
Yeah, it's a load of shit. Yeah. And it's just like, you can go on and on with this and they'll just keep saying they can't control their followers. I never said that they had like an implant in their brains, you know, but you can influence your followers.
Well, Contra's talked a lot about how, you know, when she's talked with like Roaming Millennial, like her response is like, well, you know, there's Nazis in the chat, but there's always Nazis in the chat. And it's kind of like, I can count on one hand the number of times like Contra's done a stream and we've had like Nazis in the chat. Yeah. But a certain vibe, you know, you accept certain things, you don't stop certain behaviors, you end up with Nazis in the chat. And you can't just act like that's something that just happens. It's happening because you're producing something that the Nazis like or agree with. You know, they don't show up completely unbidden. Like, you know, like even with Contra, when they showed up, it was after she did that, like, decoding the alt-right video, you know. Like, these people... They're not just everywhere. There aren't that many of them. They try and make shows of force to make it look like there are more of them in order to chase other, you know, sympathizers out of the woodwork. But they're trying to get any person who wouldn't normally think like, oh, there's so many other people who agree with me. I should start doing that. Okay. You know, it's, you know, it's.
I had the same argument with. And this, unlike our last one, which was a very focused interview, this one's going all over the place.
Yeah.
But I had an argument today with Godless Engineer, who I think is not, you know, he's not terrible. He's not a bad guy. He's sort of someone who's been supportive of MythCon. And so when Sargon went to MythCon, there were a lot of people, and I think some of them were probably really hard on the MythCon people, and some of them weren't so much, you know, but there were a lot of people just expressing their discomfort. And, you know, he's saying to me things like, well, you know, are you so afraid of different opinions? Are you so afraid? I said, no, I don't care what his opinions are. This has never been about his you know, opinions. This has been about the fact that he sexually harasses women. And that's not an okay thing to normalize. We already have a problem with sexual harassment of women. It's widespread enough. Thank you. We're good.
And all of it, he's like doubling and tripling down on it. Yeah. You know, and like what kind of message does that send to his followers? You know, it's like, I don't know, like the thing that blew my mind the most about the MythCon thing, I forget who was it. It had the podcast where she was interviewing the guys who were in it. But just their argument in defense of like bringing him in just kept being like, oh, well, he has so many followers. This is so good for us. And it's like, you know, we're having two different arguments here. One is making like, you know, a moral argument about like, yeah, you don't bring in someone who's like a harasser of women. And the other one is just like potential money we could make. You know, it's like, I don't know, like, there's just some things, money is not the be all end all. And if you can't find ways to get people to show up to your atheist conference, yeah, I get it. You have to think outside the box, but there's just some lines you don't cross. I mean, the fact that they were going to bring Amos Yee in to talk, I mean, holy crap.
Well, it's funny because we had a conversation with, it was me and Christy who were like, Amos Yee? The pedophile guy?
Yeah.
That guy? Like, what are you doing? And they were all like, oh no, he's disavowed.
Well, these same people are probably, like, a lot of, like, the people who are showing up to see Sargon are, like, pizza gators. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know. The right wing's got some really weird shit in regards to, like, I don't know. It's really gross because they'll both accuse everyone around them of being pedophiles, but then embrace someone who appears to be a pedophile. So I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things where it's just more common in their kind of like circle. So as a result, they just take that to be the norm and, are just operating off of this kind of like skewed perspective. But yeah, like Amos Yee, like seriously has said shit like, a kid who's like 5 can consent to sex. I mean, holy fuck. I mean, that's like.
He said babies could do it. He says it doesn't even need to be verbal. Like, that's insane. I mean, it's all insane. I don't want to like to make it seem like 13-year-olds are fine. No, they're not.
Yeah.
It's all insane. But the idea that babies could do it.
Well, yeah. Yeah, it's just. I mean, what is he, the freaking lead singer of the Lost Prophets? I mean, it's just. Yeah, and then Sargon brought him on his show to interview him, which, I mean, let's face it, that was a fucking victory lap. That's Sargon going, haha, I got to go to MythCon after all, even after Steve Shives and Christy Winters, like, asked them to disinvite me, so I'm gonna bring on this freaking pedophile. And then when he started giving really, like, fucked up answers, he basically coached him through that interview. He was just like, oh, well, you must really mean this, or you must really mean that, or if you wandered too far afield, he'd quickly change the subject. It was almost like he was coaching him for, like, how to make his pro-pedophile arguments better. I mean, like, yeah, Tim's video on that was dead on. That was the grossest conversation ever.
It's horrific. And a lot of it was awful. But, going back to sort of the argument I was having with Godless Engineer, he's saying, well, assholes are going to be everywhere. Assholes are going to do this. Assholes are going to do that. We don't have to normalize them. We don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to invite them to your conference. You don't have to put them on a stage. There are a lot of people in the world.
Well, yeah, like, hell, going back to, like, my story, I had a friend who started getting, like, scary fascist, and, after trying to talk him out of it for months, he basically threatened me. I ended the friendship. I kind of decided, I don't know what this person is going to do or what's going on in their head anymore. And yeah, it was painful. At that point, I didn't have a lot of friends right after college. So it was not easy to, like, admit that my friend had just turned into this, like, weird, paranoid, potentially dangerous person. But I did it. Things were like Malf Buddha's friend was the person who shot at those counter protesters at the Richard Spencer event. I mean, it's just like, I don't know, like, apparently this guy also got kicked out of, like, some neo-Confederate event a few months ago. It's like,
and I saw that. That was
why are you being friends with these people?
That was kind of
I get it, it's hard, but
I don't think it's as hard for Mouthy Buddha as it was for you, because I don't think Mouthy Buddha, honestly, And I watched I brought my fasci friend over to watch this thing where they were sort of talking about white nationalism, talking about Lawrence Southern, talking about these things. I really, I'm sure that you, with your friend, was like, no, this isn't okay. This isn't okay.
Yeah, I didn't ever try and like, I never tried to encourage or anything. Like when you start getting into like electrogravity, which is this like weird pseudoscience crap that claims that like gravity and electricity are the same force, and he was like claiming there's a conspiracy to suppress it. My response to that kind of like, do you really think that every scientist in the world, is just foregoing a Nobel Prize in order to keep some secret? He basically claimed that like Israel is being run by Nazis. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, so it sounds like you're getting into anti-Semitism, but you're also trying to claim that it's not anti-Semitic because it's Jewish Nazis. It was just, I could not wrap my head around the mental gymnastics.
All right, so Mouthy was completely not that. He was not challenging his friend. He was not, different things were said that were just incredible, right? Like, so he, at one point, his friend says something about gassing the Jews. And he says, I don't want to gas the Jews. You don't want to gas the Jews, do you? And this young man who is now, been arrested for attempted murder, but his friend is like, well, maybe a few. It's like, and he's just going on with it. He's just going with it. It's fine. It's like, that's where we start. There's such a thing as social norms. So, what did I just say?
We were talking about H.P. Lovecraft, and how he claimed that he just couldn't control his.
Oh, I mean, when I had after my second child was born, horrible postpartum depression. And I was having like violent imagery, violent thoughts, terrible thoughts in my head. So I got help. I reached out to a psychologist. I called my doctor. I called the psychologist because it's not normal and it's not okay. And I knew that. And I got help and was better after that. So that, come on, you have responsibilities to your mental health. You have, it's not like I have this disruptive thought and, oh, well, I guess I'll just be racist now.
I think a lot of this also is like, we'll stop and think about like what these people do in their spare time. I think that like, a lot of these people, their only hobby is maybe like playing video games. And they're probably like first-person shooters and stuff. When I've had like, I've dealt with a lot of like depression and psychological issues in my life, and I poured my effort into hobbies. I taught myself how to draw, paint, build things out of Lego. Actually, look, I have these bins of Lego behind me that I've accumulated. But like, yeah, you have, you find something that will just take your mind off of these things and enable you to decompress and chill and focus on something different. So even if like you don't have the financial resources to see a psychiatrist, there are things you can do, to kind of like, if you realize like, oh, I'm having kind of violent thoughts or something, to focus on things that aren't like that and build up the mental discipline. I get there are a lot of people who do not have, the ability to deal with like mental illness on their own. That's probably most people. But you know, like, I don't know, yeah, he should see a psychiatrist, or if that's beyond his financial means, there are, you know, steps he can take to try and change the way he's thinking. I mean, like, I basically got back into art in order to get out of depression. You know, like, I was very depressed. I was making lighting fixtures in a smoke-filled room with a supervisor who had been kicked out of the Philippines for labor violations. At the time, I decided to get back into digital painting. So, you know, just find something constructive in your life. You know, like, I took up painting, and, you know, now I'm paying a decent number of my bills doing it even. I definitely think, like, you know, depression and loneliness are a big part of it, because at my lowest points, I've had some pretty dark thoughts, but I never kind of just went, oh, this is the way I have to think now.
I mean, it's bad because with Mouthy Buddha, I had posted today, because these were his friends, and I'm not saying, he didn't know that this was going to happen. He didn't have anything to do with it directly.
Yeah,
so, and, you know, it's all blown up, and people are just going after him, and I'm saying, well, maybe we give the guy a day. Just give him a day. Well, we shouldn't let Nazis do that, you know. And it's like, he might be on the edge, you know? Like, let's pull back instead of pushing him over. Because this could be a crisis point where he could either take it as a wake-up call, like, oh, I didn't, like, sometimes, honest to God, people, especially young guys, I'm sorry to, if this comes off as sexist, but, like, guys, young guys, I don't think that they process all the way through to the consequences. And that's the thing. They can understand, like, oh, we're just having fun here. This is funny. This is ironic. This is triggering the libtards or whatever. And they're not processing that, just like Sam Harris would say, ideas have consequences. And that's how it works. And so, like, but if he's in a weird place now, a minute's worth of compassion might be the difference between which way he goes from here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Like, I mean, like, if these guys are as close of friends as you said, like, I'm honestly concerned. I hope he doesn't hurt himself or anything like that. You know, this has got to be a really dark moment in his life, and I do feel bad for him. You know, like, seeing something like that happen to a friend of yours is super, super traumatic. I can't imagine what that's like. You know, I have not had a friend get arrested for doing something violent. And I do feel for him in that regard. I imagine he's probably in a really place. I do think he does kind of need to step back and kind of realize, like, you know, these are the people I'm hanging out with. Maybe I need to find other people to, you know, socialize with who, you know, aren't going to put them at risk for this kind of stuff in the future. But yeah, like, I mean, hell, like, I was super stressed out over a bunch of teenagers dogpiling me the other day over that illustration. I can't imagine how many magnitudes worse this must be.
You know, it's not excusing anyone for anything. These three dudes, so these people almost took someone else's life away from them. And that's not fucking okay.
Yeah.
Over nothing. Over being friggin' fascist Nazis. Over this bullshit. Right? Yeah. So, there's no excuse. And there's no excuse for what Mouthy Buddha has done. And there's no excuse for any of it. And I can't say that all these people who've been gaslighting our concerns, like, I can't say any of that thing. But I can say that I want to wake up in a slightly safer world tomorrow than today, and I think that might be better accomplished with just an ounce of of kindness today. Might be, maybe. It's worth a shot.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, we have had people come over. I mean, people have, changed their minds. They've reached that point where they kind of realize they're on the wrong path and they need to turn around, and we need to show people like that compassion. It's one of these things like, yeah, I saw that he was friends with them just a few minutes before we started talking. I mean, it's just kind of like, it's like, wow, I don't know. It's one of these things where, like, I'm a little afraid of finding out what happened to my friend. I haven't talked with him in years now. Mm-hmm. It's one of these things. I hope he's gotten his life together. I hope he's found a job he likes. I hope he is getting fulfillment out of his life. But I don't know. And honestly, I have to admit, I hear about incidents happening. I do get a little bit of a thought back. God, please don't let it be him. Please don't let him be involved in anything bad. Yeah. Because it's like he's had several years. I don't know, like, if he's gotten his life together, if he's fallen further down that rabbit hole. Like,
and for me, I have a current friend who, it's amazing when they go down, when they take that red pill, as you say, and you just are sitting there watching it. It's like watching a slow motion train wreck, and nothing you do seems to help it, because, like, you can see it, you can see that it's coming, you can see that they're going through all these same motions, and you're just going, you feel like in that, like that movie slow motion person going, stop, and nothing is going through. So it's weird.
Oh yeah, and like, I don't know, like I was working just like kind of a for work thing a few years ago where I was helping a company pack up a bunch of stuff they had in a storage unit so they could ship it to a customer. And we were out there on a Sunday, like, essentially taking a bunch of like furniture arrangements like out of the storage unit, wrapping them in bubble wrap, putting them on a truck, and this random guy walks up to us and is like, well, what are you doing? Why are you working today? And we're like, oh yeah, it's Sunday, but we're working. He's like, no, don't you understand? And he goes back to his truck and he takes out this Xerox and he writes all this stuff on the back with a Sharpie, and he gave it to my coworker and tells him, like, the world's going to be over in a week. Why are you working? And I still have it somewhere. I don't know what I did with it, but it's a sheet of paper filled with these YouTube links to these weird, creepy conspiracy sites that were claiming that there's like an invisible planet that's going to crash into Earth, and like a bunch of like sovereign citizen nonsense. And it's one of these things where it's just like, at some point, this person was normal, I would think. It was just like, it's just kind of stunning to encounter someone who's that far gone. But it's also one of these things where it's like, yeah, well, what did he give us? He gave us a bunch of YouTube links. He was guided there. And I think that, like, that's part of the reason, I'm like involved in this community, is because, like, there needs to be some pushback against that. Like, back in the day, you'd have like, you'd see someone just wheat paste something to a wall somewhere with some crazy stuff on it. Now you can reach millions of viewers, and if you're decent at like putting together, good production value or good quality audio or whatever, you can trick people into thinking you're a lot more legitimate than you are. And I mean, hell, like Alex Jones is like a big thing now. He talks with Donald Trump on the phone. I mean, we're talking a guy who like takes off his shirt and runs screaming around the studio, like makes like $30 million a year and has the ear of the most powerful office in the world. And like before the internet, something like that wouldn't be possible. The FCC would shut it down. So yeah, like we're seeing kind of like the effects of like this radicalized free speech where people can say whatever they want, relatively consequence free. And I don't know, like ideas, they spread like a virus. And if they're bad ideas, like like you were quoting Sam Harris, ideas have consequences. I mean, like right now they're taking all the information on like global warming off of EPA websites, and let's face it, it's because like we have a bunch of like Christian dominionists who think either that the end of the world is good or that God would never allow the world to be destroyed. So yeah, why not just burn a shitload of coal? I don't know. It's weird. Like my dad's a priest, and yeah, said he's got a lot to say about like the prosperity gospel. And how, it's like, it's like the cult of Mammon, but wrapped in this like thin veneer of Christianity. It's not really in any way Christian. It's like, Christianity is kind of like, you're supposed to do the right thing and you get rewarded, like, in the afterlife. And whether or not, honestly, like, if you're rich, it's hard to be a good person is a pretty central part of Christianity, or to the point where it's like nearly impossible. But yeah, these people will claim that like, if you're good, God rewards you, like it's this one-to-one thing. So it's like, like that attitude, you take it to its logical ends. It's like, what happens? Oh, some person got hit by a drunk driver. Oh, well, they must have deserved it. It's like, well, where's the compassion? Where's the part that's like, you're supposed to help people who are less fortunate than you, or people who suffer from, like an accident or something, in their life. You're supposed to comfort, the sick and all that. It's just, I don't know, but it's just people want things to be that simple. I mean, like, it's another reason, I think I like a lot of the people I do on YouTube is, like Contra Points, Hbomberguy, Lindsay Ellis, and also that people might be, like hostile towards, and presenting them in a way that is entertaining enough for people to actually consider it, or even like, get things essentially by people that they don't realize, like Lisa Hansen, who does, Maven of the Eventide, has a real feminist bend to all of her critiques. But I'm willing to bet, like, a lot of people don't realize, like, how feminist, like, a lot of her arguments about these vampire movies and books and stuff are. But, she's just so entertaining and so watchable that, she gets people to consider ideas that they might be, like just kind of hostile towards. I think it's like not just like, our side has to be better because there's more left-wing people. I think that like we're better because we have to be in order to communicate our ideas. We have to be a step above. Like, I can barely scrape by on my art. But then, what's his name? Vox Day does his like shitty superhero comics that look utterly atrocious. Like seriously, not even just the quality of the drawing, the paneling of those books is a nightmare. Like from the pages that he's posted, it's difficult to tell what's happening panel to panel, which is the most basic thing you have to be able to communicate doing comic books. But he can make $50,000 or $100,000 on it. Like just because he's telling people what they want to hear. If I want to make a living doing comics, I have to actually be good.
And well, I saw something with Lauren Southern, where she was surprisingly, I think, pretty honest, where she said, basically, you can go anywhere for liberal media. If you're interested in liberal media, far left media,
oh yeah,
halfway.
You.
But if you want white nationalist media, there's not a lot of places to go. So there's like this concentration, and then they can say, look how much bigger my audience is than your audience, which they don't appreciate. Well, is your audience anything like the audience of Rachel Maddow or this person or this person and this person? It's just that there's a lot more opportunities out there for people to who are sort of left-leaning to go to different places. There's like 10 if you're that hardcore right-wing, because it's that
it's also
much.
Well, it's also, I think, like this has been pumped up a bit by the fact that people aren't really, harder to gather like demographic information. Because like, oh god, what's his name? Glenn Beck's show was canceled despite having millions of viewers because, like not just like the controversial things that he said, when they actually did like real detailed demographic looks at who was watching his show, they realized it's all a bunch of like broke, divorced, like 50-year-old men who, as like a demographic for marketing, just they're not any good. Like, why would you spend money on people who aren't going to buy most products? So I feel like YouTube has been successful because, yeah, it's hard to tell, like, what are those demographics of people watching these videos? It's not like an ad buy for a television show where where it's necessarily going to go. It's an advertiser buying money with YouTube, and then YouTube sticks the ad on videos. You know that you're getting a certain number of views, but you don't necessarily know, like, who's watching. So I think part of this is just, it's like this market distortion. If they actually had accurate info about what videos their ads were getting played on and what the demographics of those videos were, I don't even think they'd have YouTube, because, these like ultra right-wing people, I mean, unless you're going to sell them like an AR-15, where are they spending their money? They're not like going out and like buying Lexuses or, tons of like high-end electronics or anything. They're just like, they're empty calories, I think is the phrase for like advertising. Well, what's funny is they've actually done studies that show that a lot of men, after they get divorced, end up like richer because support is less than what they'd be spending if they were actually living with their family. So I think a lot of it also just has to do with, a lot of these people, they probably are poorer. Which, like, I hate to stereotype or whatever, but, from an advertising point of view, you want people with disposable income. But yeah, I think that, like, a lot of this stuff is just, like, weird aberrations that have kind of come about as a result of media doing a really bad job of kind of making the leap onto the internet. And I think a lot of it's also, like, I think, like, let's face it, they were probably overpaying for advertisement. I don't think web ads have the same impact as television ads, especially the way, like, I use ad block a lot, so I don't see ads that much. But I remember, like, when I didn't, you'd see the same advertisement like 20 times on YouTube. Just the same one, and I just cannot imagine that it has the same impact, if you're getting bombarded with the exact same advertisement over and over again. It's one of these things where, I just don't think they really have the data to really kind of figure out, like, where they should advertise, how it should work. And I think that, that plus just, you look at the way social media works, where they look at, you liked this, well, here's similar things, and it'll draw you deeper and deeper, into something. And if you're like, say, into model trains, then sure, you're going to get into the really hardcore model trains. Here's how to make like a period New England village, like absolutely perfectly down to all the needles on the pine trees. But if you're into like hardcore white or, right-wing politics, it'll turn you into like hardcore, like white nationalist stuff.
Yeah. So kind of segueing, I'm so good at this. This is like awesome. I'm awesome. Yeah. God. This is my first ever interview, not counting the original interview that I screwed up. So, but I think we should probably talk a little bit about your art and about your
probably
style.
Should, yeah.
Because, we talked about it a little the first time. So I don't know if you want to sort of go into your process or your style or, different things. We've been looking at a lot of your drawings behind you. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, a lot of these are from college. They're like just kind of figure drawings that I did and, kind of hung up when I moved into the apartment. Actually, they've been here probably longer than I've been working. since I kind of got back into, art. Like, I don't know, like I bounced around a lot. I started off doing like really abstract stuff. Here, I can show you something here. You look at that, like kind of these like big, that was actually a drawing I seriously injured myself doing, because I would do these endurance drawings where I would draw for like 10 or 12 hours at a time with no breaks. So I ended up like messing up the tendons in my hand, and after that I kind of did these paintings where I would like drip ink and acrylics onto like different shaped like plastic containers or sheets of glass, and then pour Elmer's glue over them and pull them up and use them as transfers, and basically put them on canvas and pour hot water on them, and they would kind of like melt together and create this like kind of really plasticky textural kind of effect. And they were neat, but they were a lot more fun to just kind of sit there and watch them form and come together than I think they were as like finished pieces. And I'd always kind of been into comic book art, so I kind of got into that. If you see this drawing here, was something a friend of mine penciled that I inked. That was like, the kind of comic booky stuff that I did. I'm really into like French comics, which is like really, really detail heavy stuff. Like I'm a big fan of like Zoran Janitov, who used to work with Mobius on stuff. He was like a colorist for a bunch of his books, but draws comics himself, which are like really meticulously detailed and hatched out, which I think like transfers well to like digital painting. I don't know, it's funny, like I have a lot of issues where if I can't like do a drawing and then color it very well, because kind of as I start rendering out the forms, I'll notice all these drawing mistakes. And when I draw, I kind of start like with a point and kind of like render all the forms out. So I'm not really good at kind of putting together a skeleton and then kind of decorating it. So I think that's kind of what drove me towards digital painting, because I can both like, kind of sculpt something out, but then if I kind of hit the edge of the page, I can then resize it like really easily. Whereas if you're doing stuff in traditional media, you hit the edge of the page, it just means you screwed up your composition. Like I said before, I kind of aimed towards realism, because it's something that people both recognize. Just oh, this takes a lot of work. It's like right there in front of you. And also because, for, like if the alt-right is going to critique me, if I'm doing the kind of art that they think is good art, then it shuts down that critique. They can't really be like, oh, well, you suck at art. And also these other things, like actually like this month I've been doing Inktober for most of the month. So that's been frustrating, realizing like, wow, I really lost my inking skills over like the last few years because I just hadn't been constantly doing it. But, I feel like I'm starting to get them back, starting to kind of figure stuff out. Been looking at a lot of other artists and kind of how they, do their stuff. Like, tried a few tools. I think I'm mostly just going to focus on microns. Like, I used to be all right with a nib, but the issue with it is the ink stays wet so long, I just always end up smearing it. Even though you can get probably the best line quality out of it. And also a bad habit of like, I'll just bear down too hard and suddenly it kind of like catches the paper and spatters. And, I prefer to have like really clean, neat drawings when I can manage them. Although I have definitely done some ugly drawings this month. But, I'm also kind of working on like a more kind of like anime style, which, I did some stuff for Ranting Feminist in, and, like a lot of the stuff I've been doing with that, I haven't been posting. I've just been kind of developing it so that, when I, like my goal is essentially I'm going to keep doing the drawing a day for a year. So I have 6 more months. And after that, I'm going to kind of assess and kind of pick a direction, but I'm aiming at doing like a digital comic. So I need a style that I can kind of reproduce and which I don't need like grants for, or at least which I can make do with just like, just posing myself, or there's a program called Design Doll I use, which is like a 3D model program where you can kind of alter the proportions of everything and then kind of, screw around with their poses in order to figure out foreshortening and that kind of stuff.
So that's cool. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
And are you going to do more like T-shirts or more merchandise? Do you have any plans for that? Or
like Contra and I have a few ideas. She's approved like 1 or 2 ideas, which I'm working on, and we have to fix that one design. So we gotta like find some new phrase or something we can put on it that isn't in trouble, and kind of keep going with that. I'm hoping to get like 1 or 2 new designs added a month. I kind of think based off the response, people really liked the Tabby design, so we should probably aim more for like simple graphic, kind of designs for stuff. Like that seems to have gotten the best response. Plus the others, like they're all rectangular, so you end up with just kind of like a solid rectangle on a shirt, which graphic design wise, I don't think is the best. Like, for posters and stuff, I think they work, but the Tabby design works because, it's like a cutout design, so it can be put on a bunch of different colored shirts. And, it just has like a much more interesting shape to it. So I think that's kind of the direction I'm going to lean for future drawings.
All right. So I'm trying to think if there's anything I've forgotten to ask you. Because I don't want to like wake up tomorrow and go, oh my God, how did I forget that?
We could talk about my influences as an artist, because
there you go.
All right. Geez. See, this is why I have to regret it, because it's like I feel like I'm just going to tell you like the last artist whose Twitter account I went through. I don't know, like probably like my favorite artists are like definitely Mobius. That guy, I feel like he's just like a magician. Like some of his art I just look at, I just cannot even figure out where you would even start, like for just like that simplicity. I mentioned Zoran Janitov, who I'm like a big fan of. Oh God, now I'm really ashamed of myself. Makoto Yukimura, who does Saga, which is just an exceptionally good comic book. He has this like really meticulous, detail-heavy inking style, which, I mean, that book is just kind of amazing, because you don't usually have a book that has that quality of art that also has that good of a story and seems to be conceptually so sound in like what it's trying to do. I'm also like a big fan of like Junji Ito, who does like really surreal, creepy horror comics. Trying to think like who else do I like who is not just like a comic book artist. I was like a huge fan of Marcel Duchamp when I was in college, because I think he's a really fascinating character, because it's like not just, he produced a pretty small volume of art and continuously claimed that he'd quit doing art, but he had worked essentially helping rich people pick which artists work to buy. So probably his biggest influence is actually, he was a major figure in just deciding which artists people thought were really good. So I think that's just really kind of an interesting, kind of way to have influence. He has this very small body of work, which are all kind of interesting things. And there's definitely this like element of play and humor to his stuff. Like, what is it? The Great Glass, which is this enormous painting he did on a piece of glass, which was kind of a process piece in that like he allowed like dust and things to accumulate and stick to it and kind of left it there. And the explanation for what it is and how it works, I wrote a paper about it in college. I don't remember it that well, but it was so it can only be taken as a parody of like metaphysical art, where it's just like I don't know. There's like this amazing like sense of humor to everything that he did. Like he'd had a performance piece at some gallery show where he just like tied this web of string all throughout the gallery because he was kind of like doing satire on like, you know, if you go to a crowded gallery trying to see the paintings around people's heads. So he just decided, well, since there's naturally these obstacles here, I will imitate the obstacles that people will endure in order to see art. I mean, like it's hard.
It's interesting because I actually have like a little collection of sort of reverse paintings, reverse glass paintings. You know what those are? Do you know what those are?
It's where you like paint on like one side of the glass and you look at it through.
Yeah, it fascinates me because, you know, what most painters do is build up art from.
Oh yeah, you have to know what you're doing to do that.
So it's like it's really interesting to me that you would have to be like, okay, I know what I want to see here, and I'm going to start from the top down instead of the bottom up, you know, sort of from an art perspective. So
you can't make mistakes.
Yeah, because you can't just like smudge them.
Yeah, one of my professors in college did some of those. I told you about him last time. Yeah, he had a lot of sense of humor in his stuff. Like he did a series of paintings using Dick from Dick and Jane. It was about him growing up being gay. The series was called Only Dick. He was a fascinating dude. He was like definitely one of the better teachers I ever had. I remember he had a show when I was in college, and the reviewer of it in the newspaper referred to him as a muckraker. It was just so appropriate. I freaking loved that teacher. He was awesome.
And so I think one of the other stories I want to get in is that that sort of painting that you did for Sean, which was the skulls.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. All right. Well, I did that while I was on acid, which essentially I had gotten a hold of 3 hits of acid, and the first 2 trips I had were both phenomenal. Like I only take drugs in order to work. Like I will take a hallucinogen and then just 10 or 12 hours straight. And when I took the 3rd hit, like I didn't really feel anything, but I just got depressed. Like the worst I've ever been in my life. And that went on for, I think it was like 6 hours, like falling into a hole. And I was just trying to draw the whole time to just keep from like just having a mental breakdown. And I did that drawing of the skulls then, and that was just like pure despair. And kind of after about 6 hours, suddenly it just kind of kicked in, and it was like the strongest acid trip I've ever had in my entire life. And by the end of it, I was totally fine. Like, you know, I was like laughing at what had happened before. But, you know, I put away the file where I'd been working on that and just didn't open it for like weeks, you know, because it was just like I kind of didn't want to look at my depression drawings. You know, they kind of scared me in a way. But then like Sean and Jen were doing a live stream, and Jen's headset went out. So she was just repeating over and over again, Sean, Sean, Sean. And it kind of became a meme, and like, you know, they posted the video up, and like everyone kind of knew about it. And I was like, you know, I drew a bunch of skulls, didn't I? So I opened it up and saw it, and it was just like, oh my God, that's basically this meme. So I tweeted it to Sean and tagged him in it. And that image ended up being probably the most popular thing I've done that wasn't based off of like, you know, like a YouTube or Twitter personality. And I don't know, I really like that, because it's like it went from something that had a really negative, scary meaning to to just a joke, just being transformed by like one little association that I decided to tag on to it. And, you know, like people tweet at me like, you know, that, oh my God, this is such a clever adaptation of that. But, you know, it wasn't. It was kind of an after the fact thing. It reminds me of, what is it? The Oath of the Horatii, which is a painting done right before the French Revolution, where it is these three men swearing on a sword that's being held by another guy, and you can see their wives off to the side crying. And I believe the story was their wives were from a city which had allied with Rome, and they had married the women when that happened, but then that city had rebelled, and they decided to side with Rome and go off to war with them, which basically meant they were going to be killing their wives' brothers and fathers. And this was considered to be a painting about loyalty to the king. Now, after the French Revolution happened, the revolutionaries also liked the painting and thought that it was great, and they interpreted it as loyalty to the state. So, you know, it was kind of like this recontextualization of what the painting meant. And, you know, like the painting I did of the skulls is kind of, you know, it's a more personal one, you know, but I don't know. It's just, that's something I think that's really interesting about art, how, you know, you can just kind of, you know, you can play with its meaning in ways that are really kind of fascinating, and you can make something mean something completely different just by suggesting an idea or associating it with something.
Well, all right. And I think I appreciate all the time you've spent and coming back. I actually really think that this went well the second time around. Like, it was just sort of looser.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of glad that we did it in this way, like, because we're just sort of having a conversation as opposed to the first time, which was like, all right, explain to me, you know.
Well, yeah, well, you know, we know each other a bit now, so it's easier.
Yeah. So it's always good hanging out with you. Always good talking to you. You can come on. You can come on my little channel anytime.
Absolutely. Love.
All right. And so I'm going to just give my bye to everybody.
Okay. Bye.
All right.